What we are going to learn about this week is perhaps the most important aspect of making sophisticated drawings. Value is the range of light to dark in an artwork. Intentional use of value has many effects on how we perceive a drawing, including lighting, the source of the light, volume and density, and ultimately even the mood of the drawing itself. The first thing to know is that value is based on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being black and 10 being white. Basically, we have to know that this range is based on whatever we are using as both our medium and the surface that we're working on. Okay, so what we're going to do for our project is going to be doing value studies. Normally what I would have you all do is create a grid with, the different steps and have to use the mediums to try to control the difference in value as it gets lighter and lighter as you go across. I realize that is going to be torturous, not only for me to try to do it here, but for you. I already messed up and didn't get enough things. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a quick demo on how the mediums work to establish value, but then on your project, you're going to do 10 different squares or rectangles, whatever you want to do, but all 10 have to be the same. And then you're just going to do a value gradation from a 10 to a 0, and you're going to do 10 different designs. So for example, I'll get to that in a minute. So first what I want to do is talk to you about the different materials. If you are using the graphite, this is a 4B, that is a, I can't tell, it's scratched off, came right off. But anyway, you have different numbers on the graphite. A B means it's soft, and an H means it's hard. So if you have a 6H, that's going to be a very hard graphite, and if you do a light shading with it, it's going to barely leave any kind of a value on your page. The higher the number with the B, the darker it's going to get. So if I have, this is a 4B, but if I have a 6B or an 8B, that's going to allow me to get closer to a 10. So whatever your darkest value is in the medium you're using, that is going to be your 10. And whatever the lightest value is you're using, on this, it would be a 10 is my darkest graphite, and my 0 is going to be the white of my paper. So that's going to be my range of 10 to 0. If I'm using something else like a piece of white Conte or white chalk, or even, some kind of a paint, that means that my white might actually be lighter than this paper. And this lighting and then this paper is that's really about a 1, maybe even a 1.5 or 2. This is not really white. It depends on how bright it is. But you have to know in your mind that there's a range of value based on how dark can you make it with the medium you're using, and how light can you make it with the medium or the material that you're working on. So for the graphite here, what we would do is go with our darkest graphite, which I think this might have been a 6B. And our lightest light is going to be a 0 on the paper. So if I was going to be making a gradation, I would be going from how dark can I make this graphite possibly get to how light is this paper. And I'd want to try to get this transition to be as equally staged out as possible. Pain in the butt. I don't really care if y'all can do that. The more I've thought about this, and I've restarted this video several times, what I want for you to know is that distinction between the darkest dark you can get with your material and the lightest light. So that would be graphite. If you're going to do a pen, now this is where we get into the fun stuff. Graphite, we pretty much can just build up a surface. When you're using a pen, you basically have only how many marks of the pen you make. I mean, I can sit here and try to scribble and color this with the pen, which I do sometimes. Sometimes I sit there and just try to fill in the space. But generally with a pen, that is not the best way to do it, because you're going to just be making a mess, having to go back and try to fill in all these little irregularities. So basically what we're going to have is 3 ways we can establish value with the pen, and that's all ways of just making the mark more dense. So here's a good example. Actually, let me grab a sheet that's not so dirty. First one, let me grab a different pen here. Let's say you're using a Sharpie. The first way to create value with a pen is going to be pointillism. Some of y'all may have done this before, but basically if we're doing pointillism, the closer we make the density of the little dots, the darker the value is going to be, even to the point that you might end up with a completely dark spot, completely black. But we don't want to color it in. You want to develop it. And the other thing is, if you're doing pointillism with the pen to create value, you want to, I call it triangulating. I try to make all my dots bounce back and forth. I don't want to make a straight line because we'll see that. So what you want to try to do is just make your dots go around in different places and be very random with it. But just keep adding to those little areas as you want them to get darker. And if I sat there and took my time, I could make this into a beautiful gradation that you could almost just see as like a grayscale. It takes a while. I mean, to do pointillism with the pen is actually one of those things. You have to have the right mentality when you do it. Anytime there's an art that an artist makes and it's based on having to be almost in that, totally chill place, almost in a Zen mentality, that is called meditative art. And that's part of the meaning of that particular art. So if you see an artist that's done something like filled an entire page with some sort of, perfect gradation using pointillism, part of it is that artist had to know how to get into that state of, being very passive and taking their time. I'm in a hurry because I know I'm already late on making this video and I want to say several other things, but realize that that's part of the process. Getting yourself to slow down and find that just sort of rhythm to what you're doing and being able to follow the pattern or whatever you've established and just be consistent. So that would be pointillism. Now the next one is going to be what's called hatching. Hatching is when we draw straight lines. And the closer those lines are together, the darker the value gets. But hatching is based on parallel lines. So artists that are really good at hatching, they almost always use a straight edge. And as you can see, I don't do this much because I don't start and stop my lines very cleanly. That's why I don't like doing hatching. I can do it like this, but hatching ends up being one of those things that it looks great if you can take your time and be precise. But if you're in a hurry and you're like me and you don't tend to do that, it ends up looking like a mess. But as you can see, the more I spread out these lines, I just make them get denser and denser to make it darker. I can tell you that I've probably done 1 or 2 drawings in my entire life using hatching. And it was only because I wanted to see if I could do it, and I absolutely could not stand to do it. Trying to make all those nice parallel lines just drives me crazy. Also, I don't like to draw this type of hatching or cross hatching, which we'll get to in a second, with a Sharpie. I love to do pointillism with Sharpie. In my drawings, a lot of times I'll do a little area with pointillism if I'm just trying to get a certain type of texture or effect, and I'll use a Sharpie. But most of the time when I'm drawing, I'm either using a gel pen or, once again, my absolute favorite pen of all time is this simple Bic crystal pen. So what I'm going to talk about now, we've got pointillism or stippling, hatching. Now we get to what's called cross hatching. I like cross hatching because you don't have to be quite as precise. Because what you're going to do is you start crisscrossing your hatching. Just like it sounds. Cross hatching means you're going back and forth. And you can build up multiple layers to get different values. So if I wanted to take my time, I could actually build up a very, very slow gradation from a dark and the beauty of hatching is if you start to mess something up, you can hide it because you just do more lines at a different angle, and that can sometimes even out. If you're doing this and one gets off, you're going to see it. On this one, if you get, a couple lines that aren't parallel to the others, just make a whole set that are parallel to the ones that were off, and then all of a sudden you don't notice that you made a couple of them not parallel. Now, the hard part of cross hatching is the fade. How do you make it go from a dense area to a not dense area? And this is going to be the challenge on this assignment, is going to be you finding a way to control that within your drawing. Let's do a 2.5 by 2.5. I should do it with the. Now I do want you to erase, if you want to draw these in with graphite and then erase the over marks, that's fine. So what I'm going to do now is basically just make a little square box. And this isn't going to be perfect, but I want you to be as perfect as you can. No, I mean, I want you to draw your boxes perfect. You can come up with the measurements of that. But you're going to have 10 boxes, and you are going to do 10 different variations on direction. For example, if I want to do one that just goes from dark on one side to fade to light on the other, that would be one of your examples. And you can do 10 different ones with either medium. So if you want to do one using graphite, and here's the way I found this works best. Don't overcommit to the darkest dark or the lightest light. Kind of fade it in. You're going to want this edge to be pure white, and you're going to want this edge to end up being your 10. So here's going to be the trick, is figuring out how to make that consistent. Now, some people will tape around these. That's always a good idea. Also, to keep from smudging, you can take another sheet of paper and put your hand on it, and that'll help keep you from smudging your drawings. I saw somebody made a comment on that, I think on Facebook. And that is the way you solve that, is by just putting something over the drawing that you can rest your hand on.